Hello, I'm Hovik Manucharyan from the Grung podcast. As of earlier this week, Artsakh has introduced food rationing, and other critical supplies are hard to find. In addition to that, there is a damaged high voltage electricity cable whose repair is being prevented by Azerbaijan, and this has resulted in rolling blackouts throughout Artsakh. And just yesterday, the only fiber optic cable that was providing internet to Artsakh was damaged around the same area as the pseudo eco activists were located, and access to that cable is being denied. So, however, outside of a few mumbled statements, the world watches on. And today we're going to talk about this issue with Aram Orbelyan, who was with us 3 weeks ago, and we conducted a deep dive at that time into the topic of the UN Security Council. Today we will cover a range of other questions, and this interview is a collaboration between 168 Hours and the Grung podcast to try to increase the level of English language coverage on this issue. Thanks for joining us. Aram Orbelyan is an international law specialist who is an attorney and managing partner at Concerned Dialogue. Mr. Orbelyan lectures at the Academy of Advocates of the Republic of Armenia, and Mr. Orbelyan was Deputy Minister of Justice in Armenia between 2011 and 2014. Welcome, Mr. Orbelyan.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. As I promised, I'm back to your studio to answer the other questions which we left and any new questions which you may have.
Very good, thank you. So, and we do have a lot of additional questions for you, but let's begin with the most simple one. Ever since this blockade started, a number of world governments and international organizations have called on Azerbaijan to unblock the Berzor corridor, yet so far all of these calls are on deaf ears and verbal, nothing actionable taking place. What legal basis does Azerbaijan have sort of in establishing a control checkpoint on the Berzor corridor, which is sort of, I guess it wants, that's one of the goals that they have stated?
Yeah, okay, so it's very important, before we go forward to your question, what are the legal basis for Azerbaijan to undertake any control over this territory? It's very important to understand what is happening in the territory, not on the blockade, but overall. And from which perspective we are looking at the situation, the answers may vary. So from my personal point of view, from point of view many Armenians, from point of view which can be backed up by international law, Soviet legislation of late 80s, 1991, the Artsakh is an independent state, or at least is a people who is struggling for their independence, which means they have proclaimed their independence, but the world or Azerbaijan has not recognized it yet. And it's also very important to understand where Artsakh became independent from. Is it from independent Azerbaijan, or from Soviet Union, or from Armenia? So this is also a very important question. So if we go from the perspective which from time to time it seems Pashinyan is repeating, and that could have been seen by many their party participants' declarations, they kind of claim that, okay, the world recognized it as part of Azerbaijan. So if this is a part of Azerbaijan, of course Azerbaijan has a right to undertake any control there. And that is a little bit bordering, or not a little bit, actually really bordering, when we see that the issue of independence, this issue of security, issue of jurisdiction, of control is moving to humanitarian field. So we are speaking about, okay, we have people living there and the people are in disaster, so kind of we need to assist them. This is very important element, and human rights humanitarian element is very important. However, the issue should be still looked at independence of Artsakh, at control of the territory, at use of force, illegal blockade, aggression, and within these categories. So if we look at the territory as part of Azerbaijan, then of course they would be taking, okay, we are going next step after November 9. We can say, okay, in November 9 there is specific regulation, but this is important when we are speaking about independence of Artsakh. Right. If we are telling, okay, this was the first step, we are going to the next step, and we are telling this is part of Azerbaijan, then of course Azerbaijan would say, I want to have a blog post. Then they would say, I want to have a police station somewhere in Stepanakert. They would say, we want to have Artsakh people going to Azerbaijani court. Then we would say we want to have Azerbaijani manat being currency. It's kind of this process would go there. What is also very important, the Aliyev in his interview explicitly stated that this is not a, let's say, civil blockade by some eco-activists, but this is an action by the government, or at least this action is endorsed by the government, which means Azerbaijan is fully responsible for the action, what is happening there. And when this becomes the responsibility of Azerbaijan, so we can say these actions are attributable to Azerbaijan, then this becomes a war crime, act of aggression, which is prohibited under international law.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I'm going to ask another simple question. A number of organizations worldwide have warned about the risk of genocide in Artsakh. The Lemkin Institute for Prevention of Genocide so far has issued 5 updates to its red flag alert on Artsakh, calling both the separation of Artsakh from Armenia and the act of isolating and terrorizing Armenians residing in Artsakh as genocidal policies. We also have the perception of, for instance, a friend of mine was, we're discussing, and is it fair to use the word genocide in this case? And how do the activities of Azerbaijan meet the definition of genocide?
Okay, so to come to this question,
yes,
in addition to a little bit continuation of the previous question, we need to really understand what is genocide. So the genocide is not physically killing of some people. So if you go and kill ethnic groups, that is genocide. That's kind of clear. However, you don't have to kill them physically to be a genocide. So if you undertake any policies which are aimed at destroying an ethnicity living in a specific place, because someone can say, okay, this is not genocide because Armenians continue to live in Armenia, for example. Still, if you undertake an action which is aimed at destroying the ethnicity in a specific area where they are living, destroying their, let's say, cultural heritage, history, any monuments, people, language, culture, religion, etc., in the specific place, be it through willful killing of people, arbitrary killing, being terrorizing so they just go out, or making a condition so they just change their beliefs or assimilate. This is all considered to be genocide. This is falling under the definition of the genocide of the Genocide Convention. It's falling under the general international recognized definition of the genocide. This is falling under the international criminal law recognized of a genocide, as well as practically most of the countries has in their criminal code the definition of genocide, which would include here. So the actions of Azerbaijan, especially again, if you look at the what happened after the 44-day war, we see that the churches are being either demolished, or cemeteries are being demolished. Cemeteries are being demolished, churches are being demolished, or they are being reconstructed under whatever other religion, be it Udi or something else. We can see what's happened in Nakhchivan. So people are speaking about the Nurjugha cemetery from the cultural point of view, but this is actually one of the acts of the genocide. Today, many Armenians would not even recall that the Nakhchivan is historical Armenian land with very rich Armenian history, very rich Armenian monuments, population, etc. So the same is kind of Azerbaijan is trying to undertake in Artsakh. Already in areas where they are controlling, they have demolished many churches. And there were a lot of publications, a lot of studies, a lot of reviews showing what was before, what was after. The same is happening when if you take at the point of, if you take the interview of Aliyev and he say, okay, if either you stay here and you become Armenian or you go back. The road is open if you are leaving Artsakh. But you either become an Azerbaijani, you recognize our jurisdiction, you become part of Azerbaijan, or you go away from Azerbaijan. And if we see what's happening in Azerbaijan with other nationalities, if you look at the Talish, Tat, Lezgin, etc., minorities, one can see that there is a soft, or sometimes not very soft, assimilation of the people. The same happened in the Turkey. This is a continuation of the policy which is happening already for several centuries on the Anatolia and Caucasus by Turks, because they are assimilating all the other nations, not only Armenians, Greeks, Jews, Assyrians, and any other minority. So this is a kind of a smooth process of pan-Turkism. And Third very important element is that pan-Turkism is a genocidal ideology which is to be considered to be criminal. And when we are speaking about peace, brothership, whatever with neighboring countries, this is possible. However, this is possible when your neighboring countries do not adopt genocidal ideologies at their whatever state or major ideologies which they are going to develop. So if we come back to very short answer to your simple or not very simple question, this is genocide, or this is an attempt of the genocide.
Thank you. Now let's talk about Armenia's role in all of this. As you mentioned, the Armenian authorities placed the entire responsibility for unblocking the Berzor or Lachin corridor on the Russian peacekeeping contingent. Pashinyan even yesterday said that we urged the Artsakh leadership to talk to the Azerbaijani leadership, as if Armenia is some third country, not even France. Even France made stronger statements than that. But what is the role of the Armenian government in securing the safety of the 120,000 Armenians, our compatriots in Artsakh? From a legal perspective, there is this argument that since they hold an Armenian passport, then they're citizens of Armenia, but maybe there are additional sort of legal points to consider.
There are two legal elements which needs to be considered. One is that they are citizens of Armenia. That's kind of very important element, and this is something we need to consider. However, this is only humanitarian part, because if we say they are citizens of Armenia, and let's say Azerbaijan says, I'm opening the border, they can go in one way, so let them come to Armenia, then technically this could be a little bit tricky issue if you go only on that part. And then in general, humanitarian interventions, use of force for protection of nationals, etc., is very problematic concepts under international law. It's not giving, in general, right to just get in and do whatever you want there, even if you have the force. However, under the Armenian legislation, there is another a very important element which we need to consider. The preamble of Armenian constitution, and even before that, even more important document, the Declaration of Independence of Armenia, establishes the main areas of development in the Artsakh question for Armenian government and Armenian constitutions. Whoever is there, doesn't matter, is it left or right, more liberal, more conservative. There is a statement of two international law issues. One is Armenian genocide recognition and worldwide recognition of the process. This is very important and essential element of the security of Armenianhood worldwide. Second one is the unification of Artsakh and Armenia, because the document is making, the declaration is making, is based on this document where the both countries were, or both territories were unified under the Soviet rule.
Yes.
In addition, we really need to understand that in early 90s we had members of parliament from, or at that stage, the Supreme Council from Artsakh. So Artsakh was part of Armenia. Artsakh became independent from Armenia, or at least became independent from Soviet Union, and was never part of Azerbaijan. So if your neighboring country is undertaking an aggression to, let's say, occupy a territory, you need to have a kind of a position there, especially if the country is linked to you. There is an agreement, we can discuss of the legal part, between the Levon Ter-Petrosyan and as a president of Armenia and Artsakh government, or the self-governing body there at the moment, or the defense committee at the moment, where Armenia took the responsibility for the security of the Artsakh as a republic, or as a territory which is going to become a republic. And all these elements are giving an obligation for Armenia to undertake the actions. But let's say, I will bring another example. There is a Ukraine Russia war operation, whatever you call it, is taking place. And many countries who have no link to Ukraine, meaning there are no nationals of those countries living in Ukraine, etc., they're raising an issue that Russia is an aggressor, Russia is occupying a territory of Ukraine, and raising very specific, very concrete requests towards Russia, undertaking very specific, very concrete actions, like taking very specific actions like sanctions against Russia, there was 8 or 9 groups of sanctions by EU, by US and other countries. Now, there is a specific country which is called Artsakh, which status still to be regulated under the Minsk conference, which is to happen whenever there are conditions. There is another country called Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is undertaking firstly by force in 2020, then by kind of peacefully, but still by force, because this is something
coercive.
Yeah, recursive action against the people there. They are blockading, they are damaging the cabling, they are not allowing to the normal life to recover there, and no one is telling anything. And no one is telling anything because there is a country, Armenia, which is interested just as a member of international community, but also because they are compatriots there, because we are assisting this territory, because this is part of Armenian historic land, and we are not undertaking anything specifically because the people sitting in the government are afraid. Are physically afraid of anything. The country cannot be governed under the fear. I mean, if you are afraid that your neighbor is going to attack you and you can't do anything because you are afraid of that, then you won't be able to undertake any effective measures. So this is very important. Again, Armenian government under the Armenian legislation is obliged first to protect Armenian citizens, but secondly, we are obliged to try to undertake all the necessary measures to protect the Artsakh independence.
Yes.
So we have forgot the second part. We are focusing only on the first part. We are all speaking exclusively on human rights or humanitarian issues, which is again very important, but not enough.
I believe in 1992 there was also this statement from the president of the Supreme Council that says no, Armenia should not do anything to undermine and to even support Artsakh's independence. Was it 1992? Maybe I got the years mistaken, but what power does that statement have? Is it the power of law? And if it is, why does the Armenian government ignore
you see, there are two major policies in Armenia. There is Armenian policy, which says there is an Armenian territory, there is Armenian area of life, and Artsakh can be part of Azerbaijan if the Azerbaijan is part of Soviet Union and Azerbaijan is not Azerbaijani land but small Soviet Union example. Because we really need to understand that in early 1920s, 1930s I mean, Azerbaijan was not a Turkish country. It was a country where you had a lot of Tatars, Turks, Iranians, Armenians, Lezgins, a lot of Caucasian nations. You had Greeks, you had Jewish, and this was kind of an area which was a small Soviet Union. By telling Soviet Union, I mean the Soviet internationalism and the brotherhood, etc., etc.
And it was really multi-ethnic.
Baku was one of the most multi-ethnic cities in Soviet Union. If you just go to see the Baku, because people are forgetting that Baku is also, let's call it, was inhabited by Armenians. People are forgetting that before '88 it was still in Soviet Union inhabited by Armenians. People are forgetting that before Sovietization, the Baku oil fields were about 50% were owned by Armenians. So we just forget of all of this and say, okay, this is a country, we should not be intervening. The very important element, in 1991, when Soviet Union was collapsing, there were leaders of Soviet republics, let's call it that way. It's not republic because they are not sovereign states, they were like leaders of the regions, call it whatever you want. And they wanted power for themselves. So they were eager to do anything just to get a power. And Yeltsin was trying to get power from Gorbachev, Armenian leaders, not only Armenia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Moldova, everyone wanted to have the power by themselves, and everyone was thinking, okay, we will become independent and we will be great. And then, because of this, they were just trying to give up everything. So Yeltsin was telling, just take as much autonomy as you want, because that was the way to bring down Gorbachev, or not personally Gorbachev, but the Soviet rule. So at that stage, Armenians kind of Levon Ter-Petrosyan and the continuation, they're thinking, okay, we just need to have a country by the borders which we had in Soviet Union. And that's something which is Pashinyan continuing. This is a wrong path, because there was one country, Soviet Union. People came into Soviet Union by different areas. In Soviet Union, there were changes of the areas, there were changes of the borders, there were changes of the administrative borders, because it was one big country. Everyone, in addition to whatever, it was a national, but the Republican passport had also Soviet Union passport. Everyone in international relations was being perceived as Soviet Union citizen or Soviets or whatever you call it. Sometimes even we were calling Russians altogether, but it was a Soviet passport which was kind of distinguishing those people. People were represented, protected, acting as a part of a Soviet Union. So when you are a part of a Soviet Union, the border between the areas of Soviet Union is of less importance. It may have some importance on the local level. Is this a field where I can bring my cattle or not? But this kind of very technical issue, not an issue of the sovereignty, not an issue of the control, not an issue of the local legislation, because most of the legislation was still Soviet. Most of the laws which were adopted in republics was copy-paste of Soviet regulations. So from that perspective, it has zero interest, zero importance. When the country falls apart, then we need to understand where the border should go.
Right.
Then we need to understand what areas should go under which countries. And the principle, so-called uti possideti, what means that just take whatever you possess, is not working when we are speaking falling apart of a country. It's working when we are speaking about decolonization of Latin America and partially of Africa. But again, it's not working when we are speaking a country is falling apart, even if it's called a union, because Soviet Union is not a union. It had 15 republics, but 15 republics had zero importance in the sense of the participation. It was not a federalist state. It was the Republican elections or the Republican whatever. Soviets has zero impact on the overall Soviet regulation. So it was Moscow who was deciding everything. So it was very clear centralized state, even with all these elements, even with Ukraine and Belarus being members of General Assembly kind of artificially. It still was Soviet Union which was deciding everything on the international level, on security level, on the legislation level. Kind of everything was centralized there.
You're saying that it is, I guess this is more...
I'm sorry, just coming back. So now what is the declaration of the Levon-Petrosyan or the Council of Importance? So whenever we go to international relations and we try to understand what are the sources of international law, unilateral declaration of states has some importance. We need to understand the context. We need to understand if this is speaking about legal obligation, if someone who is doing this declaration has a status by their internal regulations to represent a country, has a status by international law to represent a country. Is this aimed at international obligations, or is it aimed at internal policies, etc.? So from that perspective, when we, or if we will be speaking about the independence of Artsakh, this is one of the elements which could be brought against or for us, but this is just one element. As I said, the more important element would be that we had 5 or 6, I might be mistaken, members of Supreme Council or the Supreme Council or from Artsakh. So this is more specific action. We had the places where people were voting in Artsakh. The electoral districts were created there. So this is very specific actions which is showing the intention or specific actions of the government of Armenia. And then, of course, it's very important also to look, if we are speaking about Levon-Petrosyan's declaration, another declaration in '96 when we had the OSCE summit, and they wanted to claim that this should be looked within the territorial integrity of Artsakh, of Azerbaijan. Kind of, not directly but indirectly showing that this should be solved within Azerbaijan. Armenia said a very explicit statement that the status of or overall settlement of the conflict should be in Minsk conference. There is a body which is to decide this question, and the Minsk conference has a mandate given by OSCE. The mandate is recognized by the relevant decision, and the Minsk conference has never met yet because there are no preconditions, there is no agreement. So Armenia made a very clear statement that we don't want to undermine it. When there will be the conference, then we will decide. We just don't say it's independent. We are not telling it's not independent. We are not telling it's part of Armenia. We are not telling it's part of Azerbaijan. The conference should decide. But we need to have a position. So this is very important. Coming back to your question very specifically, the declaration may have some importance, but is not decisive.
That's an important point, because my next question was going to be, given all of this, what tools Armenia has, or what should the right action of Armenia... what you're saying is recognizing Artsakh's independence is not the only thing. You can also say the issue of status should be resolved within the Minsk conference, right?
Yeah.
Is that...
So let's say Armenia should very clearly state that Artsakh is not part of Azerbaijan.
Okay.
It can become, it can be independent, but it's not, because and that's very safe position if the government is afraid of recognizing.
Yeah.
It's a very safe, because there is a decision, there would be a Minsk conference, and then we will decide. This is kind of a position which is postponing. Again, this is not the good solution, but this is at least a solution which is which kind of put them in a safe haven, let's call it that way. So that they kind of, if they're afraid to say, okay, there is independence, we have to assist the Artsakh government for their fight for independence, we need to recognize their independence. If they don't want to do that, there is a very safe position, which was in '96, telling, listen guys, there is an international instrument. The instrument said that there should be a peace conference, and the peace conference should decide the outcome, the status, the overall regulation, the relationship between the parties. And it's not Armenia-Azerbaijani issue, it's also Artsakh issue. Then let's go there and decide there. Today it's not part of Azerbaijan, because it was never part of Azerbaijan.
Mm-hmm.
So in early 90s, Azerbaijan occupied about half of the Artsakh, but then it was liberated. But it was never part of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan in international treaties always made a reservation that this treaty is not covering the territories which is not under my control. So technically, and Azerbaijan became member of UN in 92. In 92, the actions which I was telling in elections of 91, the declaration of independence has already happened.
Right.
So, and there is no international recognized borders of Azerbaijan. There is no international recognized territory of Azerbaijan. There is no any document which said that Soviet Azerbaijan became independent Azerbaijan. I mean, because we are telling, oh, Azerbaijan became a member of UN by these borders. No, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I have looked all the documents which were submitted to UN, and they are all published. It's kind of a little bit mixed, but everyone can go to UN webpage. Everyone can go and look at the agenda of the General Assembly, agenda of Security Council, look at the documents, the submissions, the submissions under the submissions, and practically everything is online. And there is no map. There is no statement that the Soviet Azerbaijan is becoming Azerbaijan. So there is a letter from Azerbaijani Republic telling that we are becoming member of UN, and the Security Council has passed and adopted the decision. General Assembly has adopted the decision, and they said, okay, you are a member of UN, but they never said you are a member of a UN under these territories.
Okay.
The same is like, I brought this example many times. When Japan became member of the UN, no one said you are becoming a member without Kurils or with Kurils. They just say you are a member. And the border issue, territory issues, the dispute can be solved by amicable means.
Yeah. Okay. So on to our next topic. Armenia, as a member of the Council of Europe, is also a member of the European Convention on Human Rights. So is Azerbaijan, I believe. And at the start of the blockade, Armenia had applied to the ECHR requesting interim measures, and we know that those were partially approved. The ECHR called on Azerbaijan to, quote, take all the measures that are within their jurisdiction to ensure safe passage through the Lachin corridor of seriously ill persons in need of medical treatment in Armenia and others who were stranded on the road without shelter or means or subsistence. So this seems like a little narrow definition of who Azerbaijan should open the corridor for. Do you think that's too specific? And access to the fiber optic cable, how about free passage for everyone, not just the sick and the stranded?
Yeah, there are three issues here. First one, it might have been a good decision at the moment, because it's a decision under Rule 39, which is interim measure procedure, which is not a final decision. It's just like an interim measure just before the case would be going, and it's an action which need to be undertaken because the situation is going to be severe. So it's not a final decision of the situation, finding who is guilty, who is not guilty, if there is a human rights breach or not. I'm not sure what we have submitted, what we have requested, and what were the basis of our request. However, I'm sure that another similar request, more specifically, could be filed today, in 1 week, or maybe in 1 month. We also don't need to abuse the right of application in general. Still, this is not the case for international, whenever the applicant is a country, but still we need to kind of apply. Second issue is, which is even the more problematic issue, who is to take action and what territory. We need to understand that when we are speaking about Azerbaijan to take necessary action, Azerbaijan is claiming that, okay, it's my action, it's not my action, it's Russian peacekeepers who has to undertake, and it's not Russian peacekeepers. If you look at the publications or statements by Azerbaijan, and that kind of is seconded by Armenian government, which is very strange. They say, okay, it's not Azerbaijan, it's Russian peacekeepers who are closing them. And they say, okay, no problem, any civilian can go through it. And if we go and look there, technically this may be true, because Russian peacekeepers are standing between Armenian and Azerbaijani people there. So technically, before you get to Azerbaijani, you get to Russian peacekeepers. And Russian peacekeepers are not allowing people going through it when they believe that there are going to be problem passing through Azerbaijan and going to be a provocation, whatever. That's kind of at least my understanding from what I see, what I read, what information I receive from first hand or second hand or from media. So now coming back to Council of Europe and European Convention, I believe that new requests could be filed. So for the third day, it might be positive to have for ill, without shelter, to reunification of families, which we see didn't happen fully, but at least partially. Secondly, I think the government should have kind of, the office of commissioner who is dealing with this issue should have kind of an open solution for people, Artsakhi people, Armenian people who have the issue, to just get there, get specific, very specific interim measure requests sent by government on behalf of those people. I just read in the newspapers, I think today or yesterday, that the mother of a person has passed away. They were having treatment in Armenia, and he wants her mother to be buried on the motherland, in Artsakh. And there is an issue that he is not able to do it, and the person is believing he is going to live in Artsakh and hoping he is going to live in Artsakh, and I hope he will be able to live in Artsakh. So, but if this is not the case, this is becoming a problematic. So, and so the third issue is, whenever we are requesting an interim measure, it's important it's to be very specific, the actions to be specific, but this is specific for people, not specific for actions. To undertake all unnecessary measures, meaning president can go there and say, people, if possibly allow those people to pass, and that would be all and any necessary actions. This is not specific. So, as a lawyer, whenever you are speaking about interim measures, you need to find an alternative solution. One of the solutions would be to organize the airlift and request Azerbaijan not to hinder any air transport going to Artsakh and going back, helicopters and airplanes. The other possibility would be to request Azerbaijan to allow whatever Russian peacekeepers, any other peacekeepers, without peacekeepers, to function the road through Karabakh. So there are different possibilities which we may request. To request Azerbaijan to not to hinder, to organize the road bypassing the activist or whatever place. There could be different actions undertaken under the interim measure, but the interim measure should be specific. And as I said, in European Convention case, it usually should be showing that there is an issue of life, issue of torture, and we are, if we are not in a situation of torture of 120,000 people or 150,000 people, we are almost there. So it's ill treatment for sure, and we are almost there to get to the torture, because at least psychologically, especially when you cut internet, when you have a blackout, before that you have cut the gas is back, but it's very questionable. So from that perspective, this is also very important. And here, if we go further, we could have especially if the genocidal actions are becoming more and more obvious, International Court of Justice under the Convention of Genocide, and request interim measures there as well.
You did mention that even the previous interim measure judgment Azerbaijan has not complied with it. What tools does this judgment give us if Azerbaijan is not complying with it? What sort of additional rights Armenia get, Artsakh get, and how can we use that?
Yeah, when we speak about interim measures, we need to understand that this is a question which could be solved very quickly. It should be very urgent, and it should not impair the overall procedure of the hearing of the case. So the previous interim measures which we were stating were very important, but were too generic to be possible to follow up.
Yeah.
Because when one says during the war you have to follow the right to life, an obligation which is there under international law, and every country is obliged to follow to not to breach the right to life. Then when the interim measure is there, then the government is breaching it. You come here and say, oh, you breach the interim measure. To check it, you still have to go through all the process and come to the final decision. That's why whenever your interim measure is too broad, too generic, is falling or repeating the claim you have, is practically impossible to follow up.
So let's say we submit a new request and we're granted the interim measure of organizing airlifts, but Azerbaijan will sort of,
then you fly. Then you fly, and then if there is some action against the aircraft, that's going to be flagrant violation, and it's a very clear violation. Today, airplanes are not flying because there is questionable. Is it Azerbaijan? Is it not Azerbaijan? If it's Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is controlling their air territory, so over the land. So the Azerbaijan may hit any aircraft which is flying there, or the flight would be illegal, kind of that way. As soon as you have such a decision, the aircrafts are flying there without being afraid of prosecuting on land, because that's kind of going to be illegal flight if for whatever reason the country would be considering that this is Azerbaijani land or Azerbaijani air. Secondly, Azerbaijan would not dare to hit an airplane there. So this is kind of very important element. And thirdly, third country flights is possible. It don't have to be Armenian air carrier. It could be also French, Canadian, Russian, Georgian, whatever, because the flight is legal. Under the ICAO regulations, there are freedoms of air. There are like 3, then 8, depending on what we are looking at. I mean, Chicago Convention, Warsaw Convention, Ottawa. So different legal instruments are there. So as soon as we get an interim measure, very specifically, interimly allowing the Stepanakert airfield to be used, then it's kind of clear it's going to be used.
Interesting.
If we have a very specific allowance to fly for whatever type of the helicopter, then they are going to fly without a problem. Why I'm speaking about airlift? This is very important because private action, let's say a blockade by eco-activists or whoever on the air, is technically impossible. Of course, there might be one day massive balloon flight, whatever, but this can be forever. So from that perspective, the possibility of non-governmental actions to disturb is becoming impossible. Because today, Azerbaijan explicitly telling that this is my guys, still is kind of behind the curtain. It says, oh, this is ecological or whatever activity there.
Okay, that definitely. Okay, so another question. In the last 2 years, the signatories of the November 9th statement, Armenia, Russia, and Azerbaijan have made numerous declarations stemming from that statement itself. Declarations essentially use the statement as a basis. What legal value or power do such declarations have? Considering Armenia's constitution, we talked about the preamble to the constitution. Azerbaijan, throughout all this time, we don't know, let's say on November 9 and 10 maybe, but throughout this whole time, every time it seems it's using coercive force to push Armenia to sign yet another statement. Could it be possible to argue that these statements are signed under duress by a future Armenian government if this one goes? And what is the importance of that?
Yeah, okay. What happened in last several years, if we have a new government, we have a different situation, is becoming questionable, clearly, because it's not only duress, it's also duress, it's use of force, it's most likely there is a corruption of the governmental authority by the other government. There is quite a lot of possibilities to bring up the issue. All this should be investigated, but at least the use of force is clear. Now, we need to, let's say there are two elements here. First one, we need to really evaluate what is November 9 document. November 9 document from Armenian legislation, from international law, from most likely Russian or Azerbaijani legislation to be enforced as a declaration, as a document. The only possibility which I see is an armistice agreement, which kind of don't have to be ratified because it's stop of hostilities, but it's not a final decision of a status. So technically we just agreed that there is an agreement, we just stop fighting, and that's it. Now, it doesn't mean the conflict is over, because as I said, the conflict should be decided by Minsk conference, and Armenia should be following this position, telling, okay, we are ready to sign whatever, but that should be on a conference which should be adopted, and the conference, it should be accepted by international mechanism, which is a Minsk conference. The Artsakh issue also should be governed there, so it cannot be separate agreement with Armenia, Azerbaijan, leaving us Artsakh issue open. It also should become part of the overall settlement, because this is a mandate of a Minsk conference. Now, but what is more important here? What Armenian government does rather than what it says, because technically we are having this agreement signed, and this is a ceasefire, but then afterwards we see the order from the Pashinyan to draw back forces from somewhere, to seize some territory. We are following the declaration that for a frozen lake we are not going to fight.
Yes.
Then we are seeing new statements about sovereign territory of Armenia, which a statement which I do not agree, because sovereign territory of Armenia was occupied for long ago, and I'm not speaking about Artsakh. I'm speaking in general, the procedures, and Azerbaijan is occupying Armenian land already on 2020, on the war, and some areas before war from Nakhchevani side. So the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan should be not only demarcated, but also delimited, but also established under international law. One of the things which Armenia can do, if we are going to give up everything, are telling, okay, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, we don't claim this one, we don't claim this one, enclaves is yours, this is yours. One of the possibilities would be for Armenia to bring up the question that we are ready to adjudicate this question. But before that, we need explicitly to put our position that we do not agree with the position of Azerbaijan. The use of force is inadmissible. The forces should be taken out by November 9 positions, and we are ready to adjudicate the question of Armenia-Azerbaijani territory.
Right.
Okay, Azerbaijan thinks that Syunik is Azerbaijani land. It's also possible. And Armenia thinks that, or at least I do think that Horadi-Zangilan is Armenian land. Let's go and adjudicate it. And let's go to court, bring up the argument, bring up the international documents. They will bring some declarations from Armenian government. We will bring some declarations and document from Azerbaijani government. And then we will adjudicate this issue by arbitration or by court. This is one of the possibilities if we are claiming we want to have international law, etc., etc. If Azerbaijan would reject, this is a good argument again, but we need to clarify our position, and our position could not be 29,800.
Yes.
Our position could not be, oh, by the way, Azerbaijan is occupying Armenian land 30 years, that's Artsakh. Artsakh is very important, but it's not an enclave issue, because we should not be sticking to Soviet maps. This is not a solution. This could be basis, but international law has recognized the principle of equity, fairness in distinguishing international borders. And for sure, Vorotan should be Armenian land, because the road going there has a huge importance for Armenia, has very little importance for Azerbaijan. Of course you can have another road, of course you can have a third road, fourth road, and I'm not speaking even the historical part that this road was built by Armenian let's say funds or Soviet Armenia funds, and that was a part of the Soviet Armenia. Even that is done wrongly. But we should not be speaking about only demarcation. We have a map, let's just go see where it is. But I think we need to be also doing delimitation, and that's repeating could not be the Soviet borders. And adjudication is one of the solutions, but there might be different. But before that, it's very important for Armenians not to be afraid of Azerbaijan using force. And we need to forget the wording legitimate use of force. There is no legitimate use of force. We can never give the legitimate reason to use of force. The only legitimate reason to use armed forces, besides UN Security Council, is self-defense. The restoration of territorial integrity or whatever is not a legitimate purpose of using of force. And self-defense and using of force against people, the self-determination, is an aggression. This is also very important.
We keep talking about sort of question. Now, if we have a new government, for instance, could the fact that Azerbaijanis are now, I mean, the new status quo would be that Azerbaijanis are occupying for instance, Vorotan Road or the Goris-Kapan Road. Could that be a reason for Armenia to use military force and argue self-defense in that case?
I would be very self-contradicting if I answer yes. The answer for sure is no, because if there is a dispute, it should be solved amicably through peaceful means. If something changes in Armenia, we have a normal government who are thinking and believing in Armenian values, enshrined in Armenian document, that is a constitution and a declaration of independence, and pursuing those values and those purposes, nationwide purposes. And we have reconstructed our military force, which is capable of undertaking their obligations under the constitution, which is a territorial integrity, etc. There are possibilities peacefully to gain those territories back. I just give a small hint of spoiler. The blockade of Lachin is one of the possibilities just done merely from this side, because those territories are Armenian territories, but again, it should not be done by bringing military force or killing soldiers or etc. So this could happen when there is a force from Azerbaijan, but there are amicable solutions of this issue. But for that, you need to have a government who is not afraid to act and who is bearing the values which I said, the Armenianhood, the Artsakh is Armenian territory, the recognition of genocide, and security of Armenia as a whole in a bigger area.
Okay, very good. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank you, Mr. Orbelyan, for coming as our guest again. My name again is Hovik Manucharyan. This is a collaboration between the Grung podcast and 168 Hours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.